I'm sure if you asked a lot of Minnesota Vikings fans before the season started what they would think of their team season at this point in time, if you had Sam Bradford play arguably the game of his life on week 1 of Monday night against the Saints to then get hurt and basically not be heard from for the most part for the rest of the season, have no first-round pick because of said Sam Bradford trade, have a second-round pick in Dalvin Cook, who shows you some star potential early, only to end up tearing up his ACL and being out for the majority of the season, and then you're turning to Case Keenum as your starting quarterback. A lot of Vikings fans probably would have been like, we are probably at this point in time a 4-7, 5-6 football team. And it would be understandable to think that. You'd have a massive question at the quarterback position. You'd have a massive question at the running back position, not to mention an offensive line with 5 new starters from the previous year. You'd feel like you'd have a defense that would win you some games, but eventually that defense would wear down. They would break down a little bit, and then all hell would break loose. And that just hasn't happened for the Vikings this year. It's a testament to head coach Mike Zimmer and his staff that they've been able to make things go in spite of some of the obstacles, some of the challenges that they face, some of the injuries they've had to deal with. And now, after the Thanksgiving game where they beat the Lions, you're talking about a 9-2 Minnesota Vikings team that is staring down the barrel of potentially a first-round bye in the playoffs, potentially maybe home field advantage throughout the playoffs, potentially thinking about a situation where if they got the number 1 seed in the NFC playoffs, if things went their way, they could host the divisional round, the NFC Championship game, and then host the Super Bowl. No team has ever hosted the Super Bowl in their home stadium. And now we're at a point in time where that appears like that is at least somewhat of a possibility with this year's Minnesota Vikings team. And who would have thought that before the season, and even somewhat during the season, as some of these things happen to this team. But lo and behold, here we are. And then for the Vikings, it seems like even in the face of some of the bad news that you've gotten with Sam Bradford and specifically Dalvin Cook, then here comes Teddy Bridgewater, where a little over a year ago, right on the eve of the start of the 2016 season, he shreds up his leg to the point where doctors felt like they were fortunate to save his leg. Now 14 months later, he is suited up. He is back on the sidelines for the Minnesota Vikings, and it sounds like ready to play. Your former first-round pick from 2014, the guy that was supposed to be your franchise quarterback, that you didn't know what was ever going to happen once that injury happened. The team didn't pick up his 5th-year option, all of this. And lo and behold, 14 months later, Teddy Bridgewater is back. This is a really feel-good story. It's a testament to that medical staff of the Vikings for the work they did to save his leg. It is a testament to Teddy Bridgewater and his work ethic and determination to get back into a spot where people wondered if he'd be able to walk 100% properly long-term, let alone play. Now he's in a position where he could potentially play, and he's potentially a snap away. And it's understandable why there's some discussion about long-term for the Minnesota Vikings as we go through the rest of the season for this team that looks really good, for this team that looks like it has some real potential, about who should be their starting quarterback the rest of the year. Because ultimately, Case Keenum wasn't the quarterback they chose. He was the quarterback that the Vikings got. And you understand, if it's not Sam Bradford, who you traded a 1st and 4th round pick to get, that it might be Teddy Bridgewater, who you've once spent a 1st round pick on. You would expect one of those two guys to be the guy. And in an ideal world, it would have been Bridgewater to begin with, because you would never had to make that mistake of making that stupid Sam Bradford trade. But even if it wasn't Bridgewater, it would at least be Sam Bradford. But again, you're at that point in time where you look at the Vikings and you see what they've done with Case Keenum at quarterback, and I think we've come to a very simple realization. And I'm really surprised that the Vikings haven't come out and flat out said it. But Case Keenum is this team's starting quarterback, period. And he must be for the duration of this season, because by God, he has earned it. By God, he has deserved it. And now we're talking about a formerly undrafted Case Keenum that came from a system like at Houston, so assuming that he put up inflated stats, he wasn't very good, and basically what we've seen out of him at stretches in his NFL career, especially last year with the Rams, he didn't look very good. He did look like a college system quarterback that wasn't cut out to be a starter at the NFL level. But Pat Shurmur, the offensive coordinator of the Vikings, has worked wonders put him in good situations. It's amazing how quality coaching can make all the difference in a player. And you look at Case Keenum in Minnesota now and Jared Goff in Los Angeles with the Rams. They both got out of the stink of Jeff Fisher and that coaching staff. Isn't it amazing that both of these guys are playing at a decent to high level? Maybe it shouldn't be that surprising. And look, I understand. I'm a huge Bridgewater guy. I'm a fan of his, and I would love nothing more than to see Bridgewater come back and be the starting quarterback of the Minnesota Vikings, because I was a big proponent of his coming out of the draft in 2014 from Louisville. I feel like, he still has some good football ahead of him. But looking at it objectively, putting that pro-Bridgewater bias aside, the fact is, why would you take that unnecessary risk or gamble for a guy that hasn't played football in a year and a half, in a season and a half? Why would the Vikings potentially risk a season that is setting up so well for them just for some feel-good stuff when it's not called for? And it's not like Case Keenum has been bad. In fact, Case Keenum has been very good at times, and you saw that Thursday, on Thanksgiving against the Lions, in particular that second touchdown throw to Rudolph, where he's staring down the pressure. He knows he's going to hit, and he throws a beautiful strike with touch and everything to Rudolph's outside shoulder. You're like, that's a big-time throw by an NFL starting quarterback. And look, I'm not crazy enough to think that long-term Case Keenum is some franchise type of guy, or he's some future superstar that has just started to unmask his potential. But for the Minnesota Vikings, why would you take any chances? Why would you take any unnecessary risks when things are going so well? And to me, at some point in time, I feel like you could get even more out of Case Keenum in this offense and this team in general if Mike Zimmer came out and made a statement and said flat out that Case Keenum is our guy the rest of the year. Let's put all this Teddy Bridgewater discussion off to the side. Because ultimately, it's not healthy and it's not productive. And who's to say that Teddy Bridgewater comes in and plays any better? And at this point in time, who's to say that you need somebody to come in and play that much better than Case Keenum has? And the guy's on a roll. He's got a rhythm. And who's to say he's your long-term guy? He might not be. This might be the one good season he has in the NFL, and then he's never really heard from again. And that could be it. But we know right now he's playing well enough to lead the Minnesota Vikings. They are 9-2. They control their own destiny in their division. Unless they get hit by a Mack truck, the Vikings are going to win the NFC North. Furthermore, they are definitely in the mix for getting a first-round bye, and they are still well within striking distance of getting potentially home field advantage throughout the NFC playoffs. The Minnesota Vikings are in no position to take unnecessary risks or gambles. It's time to make a statement. It's time to come out and say that Case Keenum is your guy the rest of the year, period. And for anybody that wants Bridgewater to play, believe me, I'd like to see Bridgewater play too. But the best thing for the Minnesota Vikings right now, barring an injury to Case Keenum or just a point where he falls off a cliff and has a couple of really, really bad games, the best thing for the Minnesota Vikings is that Teddy Bridgewater doesn't see the field the rest of 2017, because who knows what he's going to be able to do. And what did he ever show you, honestly, as the quarterback of the Vikings that was so great that indicates that he would be so much better than what Case Keenum is doing currently? If you're the Vikings and the Vikings fans, you got to feel pretty good about yourself right now. Because you've got a well-balanced, complete team, and a team that could potentially go all the way. And that's why Case Keenum has to stay their starting quarterback the rest of 2017.